We've waited years to see these two titans from the pages of DC Comics come to the big screen together for a triumphant clash. But when it finally got here, would it turn out to be Ali Frazier or Tyson Douglas? Find out when Johnnie Torch reviews Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. This film is admittedly a tough nut to crack. It's a very dense movie, and I'll do my best to address everything in it after only one viewing. It reminds me a bit of last year's Age of Ultron, where there are some bits of glorious brilliance amid some things that have me shaking my head in disdain. The biggest difference is that Age of Ultron still managed to make a cohesive whole out of the sum of its parts, regardless how lacking some of those parts seem to be. It's kind of a game of two halves. I thought the first half was far too slow and plot-heavy before busting out into all-out action in the last act, probably not unlike Man of Steel. There is virtually no action for the entire first half of the movie. I'd have preferred a bit more balance. I think you could take out a good 45 minutes of the film at the beginning, and the film would be better for it. Take out all the stuff with the senators and the guy with no legs, and you'd still have a decent setup. But the whole first half is pretty dull with only brief glimpses of the heroes. I wasn't a fan of Man of Steel, and though I think Henry Cavill and Amy Adams are good choices for their roles, the film still has the dour glumness of its predecessor. There still isn't any real thrill from seeing Superman in action. I mean, nothing says Superman movie like Superman appears at a Senate subcommittee hearing, right? It's pretty much the same as Man of Steel, where Superman was seen most often hanging around army bases. Where's Supes out flying around, being this beacon of hope he was supposed to be? We get a decent montage of him doing some heroic feats, but it sort of flies in the face of this universe's insistence that it's a drag to be Superman. Amy Adams' Lois Lane was actually given a fair amount to do in this film, which was good. I enjoy the character, and Amy is a good fit. Her little side mission is a bit complicated for me on first viewing, but it was good to see her getting something to do. Amy Adams really makes the most of her role, and I really appreciate that she's a confessed old-school fan of the Reeve films like myself. She imbues her Lois with a kind of reverential admiration that made Margot Kidder's Lois so compelling. I wish the film was written as to give them an actual romance. They made a token attempt to address that with the ill-conceived bathtub scene, but I wanted to see her and Soup flying above Metropolis, as in the original movie. That's the kind of romance we can't see anymore. Once again, feminism rears its ugly head, and you can't have Lois thrilled to be in the arms of a smiling demigod these days. She needs to give a morose, depressed Superman pep talks instead. As I mentioned in my Man of Steel review, I also disliked Lois knowing his identity from the beginning. It's another important part of the lore lost, because they were afraid of making Lois look dumb by not recognizing Clark without the glasses, and decided to get ahead of the criticisms altogether by omitting this concept entirely. But that concept was an important part of their character's dynamic, and it was wasted in this universe. The plot of Bruce Wayne getting increasingly irritated with Supes due to the destruction he caused in the battle with Zod was semi-effective as a motivator. In reality, it was a blatant damage control measure after the criticisms of Man of Steel. It was also somewhat amusing that they made abundantly clear that every hero versus hero or heroes versus villain smackdown occurred in places with absolutely no civilians. It's like they were saying, okay, we get it. You don't like civilian casualties. Fine. Ben Affleck made for a pretty good veteran Batman. I thought he gave a real solid performance both as Batman and Bruce Wayne. But they lose points for having Batman kill. I couldn't tolerate it in Batman '89, so there's no excuses for it here. It's bad enough that even in Nolan's films, where they actually pay lip service to Batman's non-killing policy, he quote-unquote allows Ra's al Ghul to die in Batman Begins, knocks Harvey Dent off a cliff in The Dark Knight, and what I find the most unforgivable, shoots a truck driver dead in The Dark Knight Rises. Excuses can and have been made in all those cases. But here, there's no longer any pretense of his no-kill rule. He goes after Luthor's men in the Batmobile, killing them with reckless abandon that hasn't been seen since Keaton bombed Access Chemicals in Batman '89. It seems to me they really only went there just to give Supes a reason for disputing Batman's methods, but inevitably, it was a step too far. Batman doesn't kill. Period. I thought Jeremy Irons' Alfred really stole the show in terms of comic book accuracy. He was one of the highlights. I felt they did a good job with the recap of Batman's origin. A lot of people poo-poo the need for it, but it was necessary to put Batman in context for this movie. Gal Gadot did well enough in the little time she had. She still probably wouldn't have been my first choice for the role. I probably would have gone with a more Linda Carter-esque blue-eyed native of Nebraska, but they were obviously going for a more exotic Wonder Woman here. I've never been fond of Wonder Woman using swords and shields, but otherwise, no real complaints. At least she used the lasso once. Her little cat-and-mouse game with Bruce Wayne was amusing. The little things to set up the JL characters were cool, but kind of irrelevant. Batman's supposed prophetic nightmare was a strange scene ending with the Flash apparently trying to warn Bruce of the future, presumably setting up the Justice League sequels. I don't really know how that works, but I'm still dead set against this version of the Flash. Ezra Miller looks more like Pocahontas than Barry Allen to me, but whatever. Jason Momoa shows up to scowl at the camera for us as Aquaman, and we have the bizarre scene of Cyborg's transformation as well. Jesse Eisenberg is kind of an acquired taste as Luthor. While I didn't outright hate him like others have, I think his take was indicative of the movie being somewhat pretentious as he rattled on and on about God and man and how one needed to defeat the other and whatnot. I got it the first time, and yet they beat us over the head with it again and again. Can't a Superman movie be fun without beating us over the head with its supposed self-importance? As I said in my Man of Steel review, I actually thought the religious allegory was used pretty effectively there. Here the God versus man theme is just way too heavy-handed. Anyway, on to Eisenberg. Like most, I was rather dubious with his casting and the character choice. But I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt since I'm not against a more humorous take on Luthor. Gene Hackman's black comedy-inspired take is still my favorite, and Sherman Howard's madcap, Joker-esque Luthor from the Superboy series was still highly enjoyable. So I'm willing to accept Eisenberg's Riddler-esque performance. In a way, it was needed to diffuse the overall glum tone of the film with at least one character being humorous. I really like that they went with the mad scientist version of Luthor here, as I was never a fan of the CEO bigwig version of the character. As I said earlier, I've only seen the film once at this point, but there seem to be a ton of plot holes such as, how does Lex know Superman is Clark Kent? How does adding his blood to Zod's corpse cause Lex to create Doomsday in the Kryptonian ship? And how does Lois know the Kryptonite spear will kill Doomsday? I thought Lawrence Fishburne's Perry White was actually pretty good here. I found him completely underwhelming in Man of Steel, to the point of not even mentioning him during my review. Jenny returns, which I liked for continuity's sake, although Steve Lombard seems to have been transferred. Apparently Jimmy Olsen was the guy that got killed very early on in the movie. I don't remember him being named as such, but if true, it's another sad example of how woefully out of touch Zack Snyder is with Superman lore. As to the actual battle of Batman vs. Superman, when they finally get there, it's worth the wait. I feel we got a decent build-up of the two differing ideologies, but I'm glad that they actually had Luthor behind the whole thing. He was basically playing bats, like a harp from hell, to goad him into this fight, and he held the whip hand over Soup by taking his mother hostage. Now it's fair to say Soups really should have tried at least a little bit harder to reason with Batman given the circumstances. And by the same token, Bats shouldn't have been so gung-ho, kill the alien. But I generally enjoyed how the fight played out. I thought the fight ending on the commonality of their mother's name was a brilliant move, and very touching. So then we have the Super Friends team up against Doomsday, which was another exciting set piece. I like that they had Soup fly Doomsday up and away, so to speak, which answers the criticism of the fight with Zod in the first film. At least he tried it here. I don't suppose Wonder Woman was really necessary to the ending, but it was great to see the whole Trinity there for the first time together. It's sort of like Christmas, only you find that not only Santa Claus came to visit, but he brought along the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy as well. The thing that's problematic is that Superman makes a kamikaze attack on Doomsday. The morality of Superman killing the villain again notwithstanding. The problem is, why couldn't Wonder Woman do it, given Superman's weakness around the kryptonite? Granted, she wasn't all that effective launching herself, sword in hand, at Doomsday before, but it seemed the smarter plan. The problem really is Wonder Woman becoming a deus ex machina if she were to defeat the villain after only being in the film for about 12 minutes up to the final battle. So Superman ultimately gets the fatal at-bat. I was kinda hoping they wouldn't go where they inevitably did for the ending. Using Doomsday was a dead giveaway, pardon the pun. But Doomsday was ever only known for one thing, and it's killing Superman, so it's to be expected. I've never really been overly fond of the story to begin with, but Hollywood has been trying to do the death of Superman on film for years. back in the 90s in the proposed Nicolas Cage-Tim Burton movie, and a truncated version in Bryan Singer's Superman Returns. Here it seems like an attempt for an Empire Strikes Back style cliffhanger where Batman and Wonder Woman set up the Justice League in Superman's absence, and yeah, they leave us with a subtle hope that, yes, Superman is alive, and he'll be back again. Luthor finally gets his head shaved in prison to give us at least a glimpse of the usual visage of Luthor. Batman shows up in Luthor's cell, but doesn't brand him with his specially designed bat branding iron. Supposedly Superman made enough of an impact on him to change some of his brutal ways. The bottom line is somebody needs to step up and be the Kevin Feige of the DC Cinematic Universe. Zack Snyder isn't that guy. Enough with the pretentious doom and gloom already. The DCWB Brain Trust seems to have put all their chips on continuing with Nolan's template regardless of how their television wing is flourishing with a more lighthearted and adventurous spirit. The sad thing is, this film showed true promise, but we've yet to have a big home run DC film since The Dark Knight. Heck, Batman Begins is the only film to earn a full 5-star score from me for a DC film in recent years. This film is probably more comparable to The Dark Knight Rises. I think I can safely admit, for all its faults, Dawn of Justice is still far better than Man of Steel. Some fun action, but not so great on character accuracy. I recently gave The Amazing Spider-Man 2 3.5 stars, and this film has some similar problems. It's promising and has some great scenes that are unfortunately preceded by and followed by some not so great scenes. So it seems only fitting that I also give Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice 3.5 stars out of 5. This is Johnnie Torch reminding you yet again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.